Okay, it is the top of the hour. Welcome everybody to another day of the API Connect T3. Today we have a double feature for you, all on the developer portal. We have two very talented developers from the Herzli team who own all aspects of the portal. We'll be starting off with Evan Jardine Skinner giving us a view of the platform externals, and then immediately afterwards, Chris Dudley will jump in and talk more about the portal itself. So this session is being recorded. If you don't like the fact it's being recorded, please drop. But otherwise, if you don't mind, you feel free to stick with us. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Evan.
Okay, hi everybody. So I've kind of tried to make sure this is the externals and not any internals, because obviously I'm viewing externals as the kind of things that, as an admin of the portal platform, you might want to do, and the differences between version 5 and the previous versions. A couple of the points I've brought up in here might only have actually been new in 4041, but being as we didn't have one of these talks for that, I figure that's probably okay. So as I said, it's mainly command line things that an admin would run that I'm going to go through here. So the first six things there are commands you can run, and then just a quick bit of I'll just talk briefly about the webhook and background sync support that we've got in version 5. I know Chris will touch on this as well. And the final point, which there's no further slides on, it's just this mentioned here, is that as well as the nano editor in V5, you do actually have Vi as well. So we thought we had some licensing legal problems with that initially, which is why it wasn't on there in previous versions. Turns out that there were no problems all along, and we could have had it on there. So oops, but it's on there now. So if we get to the next page, list sites. So list sites was always there before. The big difference now, or the difference now, is that it's got some colors essentially. So I think in version 4040 or 4041 maybe, we added the state at the end of the site line, so you could see if it was installed or it was in the middle of upgrading, something like that. So now they're colored green when it's all good, orange if it's doing a maintenance action like upgrading or changing the URL, and red indicates any problems on there. So being as we now have these webhooks in this background sync facility, which I'll cover in a minute, if there's a problem with the webhooks or the background sync, then the list sites output will call that out in red, just so that it's obvious there's something wrong that needs to be looked at. So the next slide there. So something that we haven't actually publicised this in the docs. I don't think. I'm not sure if people are going to want to use this or not. But both list sites and status are able to output JSON format, so that if you wanted to script things, this might be an easier format to pass. So you can just pass -J, and you'll get the output formatted as JSON. The state's just a string. The webhooks and BG sync is just true if everything's fine and false if there's a problem there. So the site that was coming up as red in the previous slide, it's got false for both webhooks and BG sync there. So the next slide is covering the status command. So again, the difference is we've coloured some stuff so that it more easily kind of jumps out at you if something's wrong. Obviously, green is good, but it's bad, and orange, in this case, is a warning. So some of the things people tripped up on a lot on the advanced portal were running out of free disk space, and also quite a few customers had problems with their DNS server, which weren't easy for them to diagnose. They just saw that things were very slow, and they weren't sure why things weren't working. So on the output of status now, it checks the free disk space, issues a warning if it thinks it's a bit low, so anything less than 25% free, it just warns you about and colours the amount of space in orange. And the DNS server, it just checks and makes sure it can get to the DNS server and query it for something. So obviously green is good, red is bad. Again, the webhooks and the background sync state also come here, so under the site services section in the middle. If everything was okay, it would just say all sites good or something like that, or all sites okay in green for webhooks and background sync. But as soon as it finds even one site that is flagging up a problem, it'll say some down, and it will just list all the URLs of the sites afterwards. So on this example here, I've just made sure I created one bad site, and that's that fake.com that's listed there. There are also a couple of new services running, so that the list of services down there has a couple of extra ones in there. So so it has one extra one, which is the REST service, and it also now shows you the state of the INetD service, which it didn't do before. The service was always there. We just weren't showing the state of it here. The REST service is the thing that accepts the webhooks when they're coming in from API Manager. Again, I'll cover those on the webhook slide. So the next page, this is just that same output in JSON format, essentially, so they can be passed by programmatically. The only thing slightly worth pointing out here, I guess, is just to do with the cluster timestamps. A negative seconds is good. A positive seconds, especially when it's too much. Positive seconds are wrong because then this node would be in front, so that's kind of that would be an error condition. And anything negative over 90 seconds, so you can see that one of the servers there, I'd killed the file sync on it, so that's 30 odd thousand seconds behind. So that would be an error condition that would cause. Well, that'd be one of the things that would cause the final flag down the bottom status to be false rather than true. So a lot of the time when people would be calling this, all they really care about is whether status at the bottom, the last thing, is true or not. And if that's true, everything's hunky-dory. If it's false, then you're going to look at the other things and see why. So go into the next slide. So the upgrade dev portal command is the command you run. So it's the command the fixpack runs when you pass -I to upgrade all the sites, and it's a command you can run by hand to move the sites to a new portal platform. And obviously, being upgrade, it was a source that is where a lot of things can go wrong. So a lot of the problems, certainly one of the problems that one customer had when they had developer portals with quite high ping times between them, so they were separated geographically by a reasonable distance, was that the file sync was quite slow, and particularly when upgrading to 4041, this caused a problem. So this is something we fixed in V5. So when you upgrade from 4040, either directly to V5 or to 4041, the file synchronization stuff went through quite a few changes. So it deletes all its database of everything that's got file sync changes in it, and therefore it has to kind of build that database up again, which can take a long time for it to decide that all the files are the right. It's got to compare them across all the nodes. So upgrade dev portal, when it creates a new platform and before it sets all the sites upgrading, just waits and makes sure that all the nodes are happy that the files are in sync, so that it doesn't end up upgrading the sites, thinking, yeah, sites upgraded, we're all fine, that's all done, whereas actually, even though it's finished upgrading the sites, all the files are still syncing around the cluster. So like one of the web servers might be serving the site fine, but the other two might not have the files or might only have half the files for that site. So a lot of the changes in here were around making that more reliable. So we get a lock to make sure nothing else is syncing files. It then forces the platform, it then copies the platform files to the other nodes, forces them in sync because it knows it's just copied them. Waits for them all the nodes to report them in sync because someone could have created a bunch of other files in the background somewhere, and then starts the upgrades. And just a slight kind of nicety is that when it's showing you the status, it doesn't no longer print new lines every 10 seconds to show you the status anymore. And there's a screenshot on the next screen that just sort of shows that. So you can see near the top it says it's getting a file sync lock, and then it says it's installing the platform, and crucially now the difference is updating the CSync2 database on the other machines. So that just makes sure the CSync2 is happy that they're all the same. And if you look down slightly further, you can see it says it's waiting for all the files in the Azure group to sync. And there's a file sync status line that updated a few times when I was running it. And the same with the site upgrade status further down. It took 2 minutes 40 to do it, but I've only got one line because it just kept updating the same line instead of scrolling the window with lots of lines of that. So the other improvement was that I had one customer who had the key they wanted to use for the web server on the dev portal, so the private part of the certificate. They had password protected because that was their company's policy. And when they installed it on the developer portal, every time they restarted the web server, Nginx, it asked them for the password because it couldn't read the key file, which obviously was a bit of a problem. So I've made some changes to set dev portal key so that if you've got a password protected key file, it prompts you for the password, and then all it can do is unencrypt it and store it on the file system unencrypted, so the web server can read it whenever it restarts, which happens at various points with upgrades or nodes coming in and out of the cluster, that sort of thing. So that's the only way around that, was to store it unencrypted. So on to the next slide, there's a new command, show_queue, which just shows you the entire queue, essentially. So before you had show queue executors that showed you currently running things and the next couple of tasks that it could execute, but there was no way to see the entire pending queue. So this just shows you the entire pending queue, and the column on the very end, the locked column, just shows you whether that queue task is running at the moment. So you can see in this case, the add task is currently running. Once that finishes, it'll get onto those add language tasks. So the next page is reset logged user. So we've had quite a few people have locked themselves out of the Drupal account due to the kind of security modules we have on there. So I think by default, if you fail to log in 5 times in a row under the same user, then that user account gets locked. And even when you reset the password of that account, it still didn't unlock it. Now, Chris thinks that bug might now be fixed. But if you can't, you do the reset, you can still unlock the account by running this command line utility now. So you run it with a -L to see what you've got locked. Now, it doesn't really check things are locked. It's just checking that there is any failed counts for any of those users. So by default, the failed count is 5. So once you've not failed 5 times, you get locked. You can see here it's showing me even though I've only got a count of 1. So an improvement in the future is to make it check whether you've surpassed the limit or not. Then if you run it with a -R, and in this case I've said -A to unlock all users on all sites, and it will go through and unlock all those users and you'll be able to log in again. So most typically this happens initially when someone installs it and tries to get in with the admin account, gets it wrong a few times and that's it. They can never get in again, and it just wasn't obvious why. Chris did also change the message now so that when you do fail login, it does mention the fact that multiple failed logins can lock your account. Before there was no message, people had no clue as to what to look for. So the next page is just a little bit about the webhooks and the background sync on there. So in V5 we have support for background sync, which is us going out to the API manager and sucking down all the APIs and plans, etc. And we have support for webhooks, which is when something changes in API manager, it pushes a change to a single API or plan or product or whatever to the portal. This means we don't have to go to API Manager every time someone looks at a web page to check what APIs, etc. we should be showing. So the REST server is the service you saw in the output of status. It's receiving the webhooks, so it's just a HTTPS call from API Connect, and it then just puts them in the normal queue for processing for that site. So that output of show_queue would show any pending webhooks that are in the queue waiting to be processed. But they should get processed fairly quickly. As soon as the site's actually there and added, they can get processed simultaneously with the add language tasks in the queue. And so it logs to that log file listed there. And so you'll see the things come in when a webhook comes in. And then the thing actually processing the webhooks off the queue logs to a different web file listed at the bottom there. And as I said here, it's invoked just the same as the other site actions, like adding a site, deleting a site, upgrading a site. And the next slide, background sync, just a little bit of info about background sync and that it runs from Drupal cron, so you'll see it listed in the cron jobs if you go as the admin user and look at the cron jobs. I think it's just called APIM_cron. By default, it's every 15 minutes. An administrator can change that. And there is also a webhook event which forces background sync to happen. So if API Manager thinks, I've changed so much stuff here, there's no point in me sending you individual webhooks, it just sends us a single webhook and we run background sync again. I think that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, so there are a few in chat. Thanks, there's a few in chat here. One coming near the top. I want to make sure I grab it. Hold on. So regarding the status screen that you show, which, by the way, is very cool, it says, the question here is, it can give us a status for Nginx. Can it give us any hooks if Docker is being employed?
So we don't currently run inside Docker.
Oh, okay. So I knew that Docker is something that's coming later, right?
Yeah.
This year sometime?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so what kind of extra information would we want in there if we were inside Docker? Just to know it was inside Docker, or?
I don't know. So Carl asked the question. So Carl, if you take yourself off mute with star one, you can go ahead and elaborate on your question there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Did you ask for my question? This is Carl Tews.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, so my question had to do with Docker and whether or not the Docker containers could be, if information could be given to us as far as from inside what we're going to see in the portal itself.
So I don't really understand your question.
Well, one of the deployment methodologies that I'd like to look at for what I'm looking at doing is how Docker could be used. And I was wondering if whether or not if that's going to be a supported methodology or if that's just something that we've seen done from customers.
Well, so certainly we are looking at being able to create a Docker container for the advanced portal. It keeps getting kind of pushed out by other stuff. But if we were to do that, we would have a Docker container, literally like a tarball, I guess, that they could stand up in Docker. Like if we were to go that route and actually give them a Docker container and say, hey, run this. Otherwise, it would just be an internal thing, and yes, we'd be running in Docker, but maybe they would still get an OVA with multiple different pieces of our Docker containers in. I'm not sure, something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, this is Dinesh here, Dinesh Shetty. Can you is there any change in the high availability capabilities of Portal?
So you still need 3 nodes to get high availability. The file sync since 4041 should be much more reliable because now there is a kind of cluster-wide lock implemented before any of the nodes sync to the other ones. We were getting a lot of race conditions where they were getting a lot of conflict syncing the files because they were all trying to do it at the same time before. So that's probably the big improvement since 4041 for the HA stuff. Was there anything specific that you wanted to know about?
No. So we did this for our customer in India, bank in India. We have configured high availability. My next question is, I know there was some chatter about upgrade. So is upgrade going to be just a firmware upgrade on each of these? Is there anything that I need to worry about in terms of migration to V5?
Well, so we haven't. So there is no kind of upgrade to the released V5 code, right? So we haven't shipped the fixed pack for the portal or the vCrypt thing for the API manager. I would guess that's coming in 5001. But yeah, assuming that we can get that working. So my customer is right now on 402, and he is looking at trying V5 out in dev. Are you saying that I can upgrade everything else but the portal? Will it? Well, no. So API manager can't upgrade to version 5 from version 4. So you can install a new version 5 of API Manager in the portal and you can test them out, but for V5 there is no upgrade for API Manager or the portal to V5.
You can't mix and match.
Something we just couldn't get into the V5 deliverable.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you no hang on. I need to. I'm sorry. I did join a few minutes late in all of these calls. Did you just talk about the portal upgrade, or did you talk about the management server upgrade as well?
Yes, both. I don't think either of them are there for V5.
There's a separate session on migration.
Okay.
So I guess we'll cover that.
When is that one?
Next week, I think.
Next week. Okay.
Yeah, it's early next week. It's
to be clear, it's
Thursday, from what I see on my schedule.
Yeah.
Guys, any other questions for the portal platform stuff?
Yeah, there's one question in it. So has the sizing for the portal changed with version 4? So that there was a nice little chart on the Knowledge Center that listed if you want X amount of sites X amount of concurrent users and so on. Has that changed any of the sizing recommendations, or is that still the same?
No, I think that's still the same. Yeah, we haven't changed that.
Okay.
I mean, they're very finger in the air because things can be so different on different sites in terms of the way, how much data they've got and that sort of thing. So certainly, if we need to revise them, then and you've got some experience with it, please let us know, because they were very much finger in the air when we put those together.
One more question. This is about monitoring. Anything on monitoring that has changed?
No. So we haven't added any extra stuff to help with monitoring, really. It's kind of it's a Linux box, and you could install extra stuff on there to help with the monitoring.
So if I were to do syslog monitoring, if I wanted to check the health of the portal server, can I, transmit the logs to a syslog server? Is that the way? Is that the recommended way to monitor portal?
You certainly could do that, I guess. Yeah, with using our syslog on there, and then that kind of sends them to the remote server.
Right. That's what I was intending to do.
Yeah, you could certainly do that.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, so is that on our plan to consolidate all the monitoring into the one place, like the CMC?
I'm afraid I don't really know.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the plan is there, really.
Well, I guess I had kind of a similar question with Kibana coming online for the analytics. I was wondering if we were going to be providing monitoring dashboard capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, Chris did mention to me today that wouldn't that be wonderful if we put Kibana and the two other things on the portal and could provide that kind of data. So yeah, it certainly sounds like a nice idea.
Yeah, I mean,
it might take a while to do though.
Yeah, it's nifty. There's a couple of different tools that do that exact thing. That's why I was when we saw the Kibana stuff yesterday, I was like, okay, I was wondering if that was going to integrate into Portal. So hopefully we'll get there.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it certainly sounds like a nice thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see when we can fit it in.
Sure. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah. So yes. I have one last question that I saw pop up in there. I think it's a good one. Would you be able to talk a little bit about the integration of the portal with federated identity solutions?
It hasn't changed from what it was in V4. It's on the near short-term roadmap, as in the next release, to add functionality that what we're calling social login and doing native OAuth and SAML direct from the portal. But it involves quite a few changes in the back-end API manager for it to no longer require having all the user IDs and passwords in the API manager database, which is what it currently requires, which rules out an awful lot of the federated identity solutions. But you can, if some of those systems, things like Ping Federate and stuff, they do expose an LDAP interface, so you can link that in with API Manager via the LDAP integration.
All right. Cool stuff. Great. Any other questions for Evan before we transition to Chris? Going once? All right, great. Evan, thank you very much. Good stuff. And,
no problem.
Chris, you should be presenter, so you should be able to go ahead. Oh, there he is. Look at that.
Is it working? There we go. All right, is it working? It's the first time I've actually projected from a Mac using PowerPoint.
It looks great.
Cool. Haven't really got very many slides. It's just a quick overview, and then I'll do a quick spin through a V5 portal that's just sitting on my test stack. As I've mentioned, the biggest change is how we get our data. So that's been most of the work in this release has been on that. We've shoehorned in a few other bits of eye candy. So there's a new theme, as has probably been covered in numerous other sessions. We now have the concept of products in API Connect, and so that's involved some changes in the portal to get rid of plans and introduce products. we've thrown away Swagger Editor and written our own parser for reading the Swagger and our own test tool. There's a few changes with things like some of the legacy attached documents. You used to be able to attach those in API Manager. You now can't, so those are attached in the portal. And then there's some nice eye candy with some new blocks and analytics. So ploughing on. The way that the portal used to get its data in V4 was slow. As the user browsed the site, it would dynamically go off and hit API Manager's portal REST APIs, grab some content, bring it back, stick it in the portal database, and then serve it up to the browser. And that was all a bit slow. And it caused huge problems on the API Manager side. The portal in SAS worked really well as a denial of service attack against the API Manager clusters because of the amount of requests we could make. So we've solved that problem by now getting all our data in the background. It's also fixed a whole lot of other problems that we had and couldn't solve before. We had a lot of problems with access control lists, where because API Manager was doing the enforcement, that meant that the portal never actually had an access control list it could enforce, and it meant that we got kind of very variable results with people being able to find things by search that they shouldn't have been able to, and very dodgy counts for when you were browsing by tags through the tag hierarchy. So now in V5, we grab all the data in the background. As Ev mentioned, every 15 minutes we go off and grab basically the entire catalog's worth of data. So we get all of the products, all of the APIs, all the applications, all the subscriptions, all the developer organizations. I think that's probably about it. Basically as much data as API Manager would give us, and we put all of that in the portal database. We then enforce the ACL on, so basically the visibility and the subscribability ACL that you set in API Manager of who can see which products and who can subscribe to them is now enforced in the portal itself, which means it's very, very fast. As a general rule, we've tried to aim for every single page being under 2 seconds for a response time. The majority of pages are actually under half a second. There are some pages where if you happen to have a product that contains like 75 APIs, then rendering that will take a little bit of time. There's not a huge amount of time huge amount we can do about that. If you have huge content, it will take slightly longer. So yes, as mentioned, background sync. You can run it on demand if you want. At the moment, it runs every 15 minutes. There's a kind of a longer term plan for making it dynamic time-based. So if content doesn't update very often, the idea is that we might change it in the future so that we don't go and look as often if things aren't really changing, just to reduce some of the load on the API Manager server. There is support for e-tags in there, so we go and check every 15 minutes, but based on e-tags, we can be told instantly as to whether anything's changed. If nothing has, then it just goes back and sits and waits for another 15 minutes. The webhooks work very nicely. On average, it's between about 5 and 8 seconds for an event happening in API Manager for the content to be live in the portal. So if demoing, just waffle for a sentence or two, and it tends to be there by the time you switch tabs. On there. For the eye candy, we have a new theme. That's a quick screenshot from my test stack sitting on the right-hand side. So there's the new Connect theme. The old one we had before was called the IBM APIM theme. And we have a lot of customers who have custom themes based off that old one. They will still work exactly as they did before. Shouldn't look any different at all. But for new custom themes, then you set a different parent. You set the parent to be Connect theme, and it'll inherit from the new one. And old themes can be migrated over to the new one, but obviously you'd have to go and might have to modify some CSS to fit in with whatever color scheme it is you're going for. The new theme is fully responsive. We've tested it on as many random devices as we could find, and as you change the screen size up and down, then it moves. You get different layouts, numbers of columns, and things all degrade fairly nicely. Introduce products into the portal. So before, you used to have a list of APIs, and you'd click on an API, and it would show you some plans, and you could go and subscribe. Now you get a list of products, And within those products, you'll then see APIs, but the APIs are displayed in the context of a product. So there's a left nav bar to try and help, which shows the product as a whole, and then you get a list of all the APIs, and then a list of all the operations within the APIs, and then down the bottom you get plans. So you can then see all the different plans, what's included, and subscribe to them. For those who are used to Stripe, the external company, it's often held up or put on a pedestal as a really good example of how to document an API. You may notice our design is inspired by theirs. It's kind of similar color scheme, similar layout. If you want to have a fully documented API, then it's up to the person who writes the API to do so. We support Markdown in all of the fields, description fields, so you can put huge paragraphs and examples with samples and stuff in there, and they'll all be rendered nicely. We try and generate examples from those schemas. The code that we have to try and render, you can see on the right-hand side, it's got an example request with a curl command line there. It's put some example data in for the body. That comes from the schema in the Swagger document. If an example is set for that schema, then we'll just use it as is, and that's a way you can control what example data is shown in the portal. If there is no example, then we try and generate one, and we try and derive some kind of value from the attribute names. So you can see from the ones there for name, it's then come up with an example name. For ID, it's just generated a random number, things like that. Well, it tries to grab some kind of value from the name. It's a bit hit and miss, but it's random data. We can't really make it appropriate for absolutely everybody. And then there's the new test tool down the bottom. And this all works for both REST and SOAP. For SOAP APIs, a slightly different layout because a lot of these fields don't have any meaning for SOAP APIs. So it tends to be, if you look at the SOAP API, then there's a large field here which shows you the request. Over here you get the response and the test tool. The new blocks, just to add a bit more eye candy. So we had customers who wanted to be able to feature particular APIs or products on their front page. So we've knocked up a quick little block where you can point it at one of the APIs or products in the database, and it'll go and grab the icon, the name, and the description, and give you a nice little link through to it if you want, and they're nice and easy to then stick on your front page if you wish to. And there's a new social block which merges in the latest posts from the forums on the portal site and tweets from whatever Twitter ID or hashtag or Twitter query string you've set up. By default, it puts in a whole load of content basically from the IBM API Connect Twitter ID. In order to get that working, you do need to go and register a Twitter app on twitter.com, and then you have to put in their client ID, secret, and token. I think there's 4 different fields you have to fill in because the new Twitter API is OAuth, and so you need to have a key in order to use it, and we can't provide one for legal reasons. So each site would need to go and set that up. New analytics, I'm sure there was a lot of people who saw the new analytics, I think it was yesterday. This is basically the same. They're loaded via an iframe from the Kibana server, so they are pretty fast. They look very similar. You can scope them either at the organization, which would be all applications for a given org, and that's developer organization rather than provider org, or at the application level to pick on a specific application, and you get 3 graphs: success rate, data usage, and latency. And there's a time selector where you can zoom in and see different time ranges and things like that. There isn't currently the ability to download that data from the portal. That's functionality we did used to have, but we have lost for now, but it will come back when we get a chance, basically. There's also plans afoot for, in the future, being able to have configurable dashboards. So on the provider side, you'd be able to set the dashboard for the portal, and then all your portal users would see that. For now, these are fairly hard-coded, but it's certainly on the roadmap to make these configurable. I think, that was it. Right, work out to get out of PowerPoint. Is this big enough? Shall I zoom in?
Yeah, this looks fine. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of layout, we now have a nice sticky header across the top, so it's always easy to navigate the site. And you get, this is the Twitter block stuff. The banner has changed. The old background has gone. We've got this sort of blue one, which is kind of linking back to API Manager. This is the background you see if you don't set an image. You can upload your own image. You can change the content on here just like you could before. This is a new front page layout, so you can, if customers have the old front page, they will keep it, and they can choose to opt in to this new one if they wish to. It's basically you just switch a different page in the admin interface and tell it to use this one rather than the old one, and voila, you get the new layout. This is all the Twitter stuff. Okay, so that hasn't really changed. The steps are pretty much the same. But now from products, rather than this listing APIs, these are products. So if we go and click on good old pet store, so you get the information about the product at the top. So name, icon, you can vote for it with all the ratings, description. There are a whole load of fields that would be displayed here if I had actually chosen to fill them in. Not a great example. You can put in legal information, terms and conditions. You can attach files here. I can't remember what else goes in, but there's a whole load of content that can go up here based on whatever was set in API Manager. Then as you scroll down, you then get the APIs. This product only happens to include one API, but you could have multiple. So you then get the API. You can click to download the Swagger document, and then you get all the different paths, which you can then expand and see all the different parameters, the responses. There's all the client code for generating, for invoking the API. This one doesn't actually have a response to any of these. I found one that actually has a response. There we go. So if the API has an example given for the response, this has a 200 response along with the schema for what it actually returns, then if that is set, then we'll give an example response object over here as well. And you can see this is one where we've tried to grab some kind of value based on the name, and so we've come up with Murty Lawrence, whoever that is. And then you can test it down beneath. None of these actually have a back end for me, so it'll fail as it did. Yeah, so. But that's basically how the test tool works. If there are other parameters, then you'd be able to fill them in here. This one just takes an ID, and then it just sticks it as a path parameter. And then where you want to sign up, there are handy links everywhere to go and subscribe, and you get the plans down the bottom of the page where it shows what's included in the plan. If you have lots of plans, then you'd get them all, lots of different columns aligned up next to each other so that you can compare what is and isn't included at what rate limits in each plan, and then pick on the one you want to subscribe to. That's the main. If I log in, actually, might be better. So applications have changed a little bit, but not hugely. So then, from an application, there's again been some minor styling updates, changing to nice little icons instead of words. But beyond that, applications are pretty much what they were really before. This one hasn't actually subscribed to anything, but you can see here, this is where you get the link to analytics. So we can link through to the analytics for that given application, which I think is set by default to the last week, and I haven't invoked anything in the last week. Pregnant pause, there we go. I'm not sure one of these apps had actually invoked stuff, but I'm not sure which.
So So the only lens that we have here is for the last. Oh, okay. So it looks like the default the last 7 days. Is that changeable? Can you say last?
Yep. So you could
Oh
go
yeah,
between.
look at that. Okay.
So I happen to know if I switch to, I don't know which one, if we try this month, there's a whole load of analytics data in this system, but there we go. We close that again.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. So you can see that the system didn't exist until then. Then all the APIs got invoked, and then I got bored and stopped invoking anything. So you can, the usual analytics data, the same as you get in API Manager, so you can hover over data points, and when you really not liking projecting. When you hover over these things, then they do zoom and pop out, but I don't think it's liking being full screen. There we go. That's a bit better. So when you hover over them, there's nice little eye candy effects, and you can zoom in and things like that. I think you can drag and select time frames like that, and it'll update. There you go. Yeah, so all of that comes straight from Kibana, served up, and this is just then loaded in an iframe on here, and as you can see, you can change the scope. The rest of the content in the portal hasn't really changed. We've gone through and we've had a sort of a tidy up. We're trying to polish things up, so we've tidied up, made sure everything's using the same fonts. We gave the forums a little bit of a bit of love and just making them not quite so hideous as they were before. Just a general bit of styling. Just generally trying to make things look a little more polished and professional than they possibly did before. If there are any questions, dive in. Yeah, there you go. Get all the nice little eye candy. Things hover now. That didn't work when it was maximised for some reason.
So
So if you all have questions, just star one and fire away. Trying to take a look here. Looks like we're pretty much up to date on chat. There was
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. Firstly, the background sync, Chris. Are you saying that, let's say if I publish a plan or a product, is it going to be immediately seen on the portal? Or will I have to wait?
Or should we do a live demo? This is always the fun bit. Now let me log back into API Manager. It's bound to time down. Oop. Right, so if we go and create the new product, chuck an API in it, grab a random one. So that's now staged. Where's it gone? That one. New, there it is. Let's publish. Yeah, go to the portal. Is it there yet? Should appear, I think, at the top. I don't know which way it appears, what the source order is. Oh. There we go. Yeah, so just about 10 seconds or so, and then it shows up and it's live.
Okay, so the 15-minute update, that is, I mean, what happens?
So the webhooks that run the background sync that runs every 15 minutes is kind of like a safety net. Webhooks are best can do. They're not guaranteed. So when an event fires an API Manager, it sends a message to the portal. If for whatever reason, network glitch or something, that request doesn't come through, it's not going to retry. So then every 15 minutes, we'll then do a request from the portal as a pull request. We go and do a query on API Manager and get all data that basically not just what's changed, but the sum total of everything. We go and get it every 15 minutes. But we have ETAGs, and we only get it when it's changed.
And is the number 15 configurable somewhere in the API manager or the portal?
Let me. Oh, I'll get to the right URL. I'll then log in as an admin. I should mention that the admin theme. The admin theme's had a little bit of attention too, so it's a nice sort of material design based theme now. So these nice little menus that pop down. So we can go to system and then cron, and it's possible to change how often the job runs. So here you have IBM API Connect background sync, currently set to run every 15 minutes. And I think it's either configure or edit. No, not that one. One of these. Edit. And you can change it how often it runs, and those are the options.
Awesome.
I wouldn't suggest, if you've got a lot of content, I wouldn't suggest setting it to 1 minute, because we do go and get all content for the entire catalogue when this runs. So if you have a lot of APIs, you'll probably wipe out the management stack, management node, if you set it to a minute.
I just noticed there's not a number between 1 and 15, but that's okay. But thanks for letting us know. A couple of questions on the emails that are generated. I know you, Chris, you personally know the requirements from RBL. So they want all of the emails that go in and out of the API manager for any reason, apart from, of course, portal registration and other things. They want that content, the email content, to be configurable. Have we that feature now?
No. So emails that come from the portal are configurable. So if I try and remember where it is, system, accounts, somewhere, people. There it is, account settings. You can configure some emails down here under the little template where you can type in. They're HTML now as of Fixpack 1, so they're nice little easy to read emails. In fact, that's the only one you can see. There you go, there's the little templates. At the moment, because the other emails are sent from API Manager rather than from the portal, we don't expose those templates here. When we move to using the social login support, you'll be able to opt in to having developers entirely managed from the portal, which means that then those emails would come from the portal and would be templated, and you'll be able to configure the templates. But that's a future release.
So for example, let's say a app developer wants to subscribe to a product or a plan. He gets an email once the approval is done. The approval emails, all of those emails, do they come out of do they come out of the portal or do they come out of the API manager?
Basically, the only emails that currently come from that come from the portal are for the admin. So when the site is created, or if the admin forgets his password. All other emails currently come from the management node, and it's not that configurable.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Okay.
We're aware of the requirement. We can only tackle so much in each release.
So this is Evan here. I've just realised something that we've both forgotten to mention, Chris, and that's that one of the other big things in version 5 is subpath support for the portal URL. So prior to version 5, you could only name your portal after a host name. So you could only have, like, for instance, apmdev0126.hosted.ibm.com, and you'd have to have a different host name, a different DNS entry for every portal you wanted to host on the same cluster or same machine. But now we have subpath support, so you can see at Chris's screen there. You can have multiple different portals, all with the same host name and with different paths after them. So as the paths are hierarchical, if you've got something called /cdbank and that's it, you couldn't then have /cdbank/prod because everything under /cdbank could be taken over by cdbank. But as long as you obey that hierarchical kind of ownership thing, you can have whatever subpath you want under there, and you can have lots of different portals all on the same setup or with different subpaths and the same host name.
So that's very handy for people doing demos and proof of concepts, in that you can do, as I have done here, set it up using the host name of the portal node itself. So rather than before you had to come up with some kind of fake host name and then put it into etc. hosts and things like that, now you don't need to do that. As long as your portal node has a valid host name, just stick it on the end. It's worth saying, don't try and do it using just the host name of the portal node. Do stick it on a subdirectory, because there is a REST server running there already on the portal node, and you wouldn't want to clash.
Great. Yeah, this is really useful. Thanks. A couple of things on security, Chris. As a best practice, I've been promoting the usage of a web application firewall in the DMZ running on data power, and several things that I was able to do, that I was able to secure. I know that you've said that there's all of the security requirements that we saw coming from customers have been addressed. Can you confirm that, and also can you tell me if I will really need to have this web application firewall running in the DMZ? Would I need to do that, or can I just leave it to the enterprise firewall to secure the portal?
I am not sure what your data power firewall is doing, so I couldn't tell you whether you still need that or not. I think you'd need a data power expert as to whether that was essential. So we had all of these different options that you can set for doing different security settings. This is an old site, so that actually should be on by default. But yeah, there's all these.
Yeah, we did SQL injection on the portal. On the WAF, on the web application firewall. Any request that goes in from the portal goes via the WAF, and if it is running, we've switched on SQL injection and protection, and it stops it over there. We also did some changes to avoid clickjacking attacks. I'm sure you're aware of that. But
so there's already there's clickjacking support built into the portal here, so you can't embed the portal in an iframe. It's got code in it to prevent that from happening. I think API Manager has the same code. So most of those sort of things are in there already. As for SQL injection, that's a peace of mind thing, I suspect, rather than necessarily adding value. It's kind of whether you think that really does or not. Most customers who have run security scans against the portal produce large documents, which tend to be full of mostly rubbish. In fact, we find most security tools can't run against the portal because of the security features on it. So they can't log in because of captures, well, at which point the tool doesn't really run very well. They produce a whole lot of false positives because we've got a 404 handler built into the site. So if you try and go to a fake page, like fake, it goes and submits the site. So it now returns 200. Well, that means the security tool thinks that there's something there. There isn't anything there. It's just submitted a search for you for usability reasons. But I have a fairly low opinion of automated security scanners. So security is something that's peace of mind. Whatever your customer wants in order to make them sleep well, go with it.
Okay. Another thing is, what about usernames and emails? A couple of customers that I spoke with, including mine, they did not want the email ID to be harvested by other people who were logging onto the portal. So do we have a capability where you can see the name of the user, but you can't really find out what the email ID is? and that was not the case with your 404.
So nothing that has intentionally happened in there, so I don't imagine the situation has really changed. It's hard for us to do that with the current setup because the vast majority of authentication backends don't have necessarily first name, surname. So all we know we have is an email address. That's it. As we move to the social login based, where it's much more configurable, we will be able to do things like that. The only places where we really show up email addresses would be on things like comments, which I think at the moment do correctly use your username rather than your email address.
Right. Yeah. And the concern my customers came back with is the email IDs getting exposed on the forums, like you rightly said. They didn't want that.
I mean, that exposes the username, and then by default the username is then clickable to take you to a page to show you about that user. We haven't really done a huge amount of work in that area. If enough customers shout about it, we will. At the moment, we have a fair amount of work to keep us busy for a little while now. So things like the monitoring stuff will probably come slightly higher than that. If customers are particularly worried about that, then I'd suggest just turn off the forums and turn off the comments.
So, Chris, does the portal has I know the portal has a built-in ticketing system. Do we have any enhancement with regard to integrating with the customer's ticketing system?
No. So there's a very rudimentary one built in here. The first I heard of wanting to integrate with third-party support systems was only a few weeks ago, and it was far too late to get anything into V5 for that. If somebody has a specific system that they'd want to integrate with, then they can raise an RFE. The big issues I can see with that would be things like authentication. But assuming those can be surmounted, then there's no reason why it couldn't be integrated. In a lot of cases, many of these third-party support systems already have existing Drupal modules out there. So as long as it's not a completely custom one and is more of a kind of off-the-shelf support system, then there might actually already be support out there, and it's purely a question of just pulling in the relevant module.
Okay, thanks.
For example, Maximo, I think is IBM's one, and as far as I'm aware, nobody's asked for integration with that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Chris or Ev based upon what was presented today?
Yeah, I do have another question. So I was just recently talking to another customer. They are interested in using the portal as a way of driving new APIs, right? So, for example, if customer is saying the existing API doesn't meet their requirement, they want to raise some sort of a RFE or new API request, and then the API manager will get notified. I guess nothing has been in the portal today, right?
Well, it's possible that the support system that's built in is fairly rudimentary out of the box, but it is possible to turn on some extra features. So under modules, there's a whole load of other support ticket options, and including things like categorization and being able to raise them via email and things like that. So if I type in support, okay. So you can tell there's a whole load of extra options here, being able to allow them raising via email, use overviews, and being able to do project management of them. So it then enables you to have different categories. You could have a category that had enhancement, because all the tickets are basically is a text document. It's a WYSIWYG editor with a load of fields. So you could fill in whatever you wanted, and it would then get emailed to whatever email address you put in. So that would certainly provide some kind of capability in that regard. Worst case, there's just the, if I get back to the support page, there's just a site contact form. So somebody could just email in contact us.
Okay. Yep, thanks.
Okay. All right, we have time for one last quick one. Any takers? Okay. Question there on. Oh, so the forums themselves are on the. Are forums still at the API level, or are they at the product level, Chris?
Good question, and they're still at the API level. Basically, because nobody asked us for product level forums. We could easily do it. But yeah, I mean, it would certainly be conceivable to have a hierarchy of APIs and products. There's no reason why somebody couldn't create that themselves, but in terms of the auto-created ones, we create one page.
Okay. All right, it is the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for your engagement today. Chris and Ed, thank you very much for the presentation. It's fantastic. So just to kind of loop everybody in, so there is no, there are no sessions tomorrow. It is a holiday in most places. So we will be meeting again. The next session I have, John Roberts, if you're still on the line, is next Tuesday. So you all should have invites for that. If you have any issues with invites, just let me know or let John Roberts know. We'll get you added. But thanks everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week.